Story by Retland Music. The Other Wednesdays. I am a natural skeptic, but an unexplainable event at a local park left two entire groups of parents completely spooked. I've thought about it every day since. Here is a story of a day a soccer field seemingly existed in two timelines at once. This experience happened in the fall of 2024. I have an advanced degree in one of the social science fields, and in the process of my studies and required research curriculum, I have taken many undergraduate and graduate courses aimed toward learning about understanding the scientific method, scientific and experimental design, psychometrics, and all numbers of statistical concepts. I have expertise in psychology specifically, so I understand common human cognitive biases and errors, such as our tendency to make meaning out of ambiguous information, availability heuristics, spurious correlations, and related phenomena. All the time of this experience, I was living in a relatively small town in Oregon. It had a population of about 20,000 people, and I was a coach for my 4-year-old soccer team. The season was drawing near its end, with only a few weeks left. There was a single person in charge of the whole soccer organization who gave all teams a set schedule for every team with a set time, set days during the week, and a set practice location for the whole season. My team was assigned to one specific park on Wednesdays at 5:30 p.m. for the whole season. There were 2 fields at the park, Field 1 and Field 2. I was assigned to Field 1. There was always another team on Field 2, so both were always in use for the entire season, with the exception of one evening. One day, I showed up like I always did. The players and parents on my team started arriving like clockwork. I was chatting with them as they arrived per usual. Then this other team started to arrive. At first I didn't pay attention because I thought it was just usual for the team that plays on Field 2. But then this team's coach, parents, and players started to come over and set up on Field 1 as well. At this point I was confused and began to pay more attention to the team to understand what was happening. It didn't take long to realize that I have never seen any of them before. I didn't recognize the kids, the parents on the other team, or the head coach. Yet they were the same age group, had the same soccer jerseys, and the same assigned equipment as us. I approached the head coach, who was a woman in her early 40s with brown curly hair, to try to clear up the confusion. Surely there was some explainable misunderstanding. I approached her politely and said, "Hey, the head of the soccer organization has us scheduled to be on the field on Wednesdays at 5:30 p.m. this season." She looked at me, seemed confused herself, and replied, "We're always on Field 1. I don't know what you're talking about." I clarified, "You're scheduled for Wednesdays at 5:30 at this park on Field 1. She nods. I checked my smartwatch and confirmed it was Wednesdays and the time was 5:40 p.m. I said, "I've never seen you here before, and I've been here every Wednesday at this time." She looked surprised and seemed frustrated, and then said, "I've never seen you before. You've never been here. I don't know why you're here now." I became increasingly confused. I said, "Did you reschedule your practice? Do you usually play on a different day?" And she again said in an increasingly frustrated tone, "No, we're always Wednesdays at this time. We're always on Field 1. I don't know why you're here." It was already getting late, and both teams needed to practice, so I said, "Well, there's usually another team on Field 2. You're welcome to it since they don't seem to be here yet, or we can share our field." She rolled her eyes and said, "I guess we'll just try Field 2 for now," and walked away shaking her head. By this point, I felt I was going crazy. I have no history of mental illness, psychosis, etc. I started searching for some kind of anchor to reality. I focused on the other team's parents and noticed that they were all visibly confused. The expressions on their faces seemed to say, "What is going on? Why are they on our field?" I look at our team's parents and notice the same visibly confused facial expressions. I had developed good relationships with some of the parents on my team and went to get their impression, since I was so confused too. I said, "Have you ever seen these people before?" And they just shook their heads, "No." Then one of them said, "No, I have no idea. I don't know what's going on. This is feeling really weird." This confirmed to me I was not crazy, since it was a shared perception. The chances of some large folie à deux-like delusion is infinitesimally small. I explained. The coach said that they've been here every Wednesday, and they're always on field 1, and they've never seen us before. And I feel the same way. I've never seen them. This is odd. As I said this, their reaction was as if blood had drained out of their faces. They were genuinely spooked, which aligned with my internal sense. The other team that is usually on field 2 never showed up. The phantom team just continued to practice for that day on field 2, and we carried out our practices and went on. They never showed up again the remaining next few weeks that we had practices. The usual team that was always on field 2 showed up like they always had previously. At the end of the season, there was a jamboree where all the teams would get together and play. All teams were present, playing a game against an opponent of the same age. On this day, I made a point to look out for this head coach, the parents, and the players of this phantom team. They were nowhere to be found. I searched for explanations. Given my background, I'm skeptical as I believe humans try to manage discomfort, including the vast unknowns of the universe, reality, and so forth, through hubris. To state that we know everything about how reality works is arrogant at worst and defensive at best. This is my way of saying that I'm open to novelty and unknown explanations that fall within the limits of my understanding and perceptions, but my mind is not so open that my brain falls out, so to speak. I must think of Occam's razor explanations, some of which could be plausible and perhaps other plausible explanations that just don't register for me. One possible explanation could be that the coach and all the parents and players had missed the practice and just decided to go rogue and reschedule outside of the soccer organization system and just planned in a cheeky, nefarious way to act confused if we push back against them wanting to practice on the field. They would all have to pretend to be confused and pretend like they're the ones who are always there, almost in a psychological gaslighting kind of way. But if from their perspective there was an open field, why wouldn't they just use that one? This would be the simplest choice with the least friction. Secondly, every one of them would have been very skilled actors because they all seemed genuinely confused, including down to the micro expressions on their faces. As an expert in psychology, I'm pretty good at being able to read people, and my interpretation was that their reactions seemed genuine. My confusion was genuine, theirs seemed genuine, and it was uniform across the coach and all the parents on both sides, and so I don't have any other plausible explanation. I have a hard time believing in such phenomena of timeline jumps, glitches in the matrix, or changes in the so-called simulation we could be living in. However, this experience was strange enough to get me curious about these concepts and concede that this phenomena may be possible after all. Yeah, so it being a small town makes you think, how many soccer teams in the general area even are there? Could there be extras that no one knows about? And they navigate to this field that they don't normally use, like you suggest, because they couldn't use theirs for some reason, and they tried to have a grand play, a performance, if someone caught them. But then, as you also suggest, why not use the other empty field, rather than the one that is being set up for this other group? It does strike me as a group that believes they are entitled to use it. Why else would they act that way? And I mean, are they all paid actors, amazing actors like that? It seems unlikely, doesn't it? It's not impossible. I always leave that on the table, but yeah, it leaves a lot of doubt for sure. And if that's the case, were they from a different universe? I love saying that. I really do. Are they all from a different universe? And they didn't know, you didn't know? What is the vector, the transport mechanism? Were they physically there, or simply it was just sight? The way to answer that would be if any of you touched each other at all, like even a slight bump, or even, I don't know if you shook hands or touched each other on the shoulder or something. Anything like that, I think, would confirm they were physically there, or you were physically there. One group or the other was in a different universe, in my opinion. That's the most likely explanation. Well, it's a very strong explanation. And yeah, I think it's still more likely than them just being paid actors, or I guess unpaid, but professional actors by the description you give. Yeah. But you can imagine that. Imagine going to a soccer game, a proper game, and you don't recognize anyone in the stands. But then why would you? I mean, I guess if it's a small town, you might, but you don't pay any mind to that. You play the game, you win, then you leave. Maybe you go to the changing area or something. Then you switch back to the real universe, and apparently you never even went to play. So your entire group then says, what the hell? I mean, yeah, things like that probably do happen. They just don't make their way to stories like this because I think there are so many glitches that happen, but to learn about them requires people willing to share it. And I think it requires a certain person that is willing to put out these experiences into the public sphere. I mean, no one wants to be thought of as crazy. I don't, even though I guess I don't, but I also don't really care. I mean, if people think I'm crazy, that's fine. But I would prefer if they didn't, I guess. But it does take a certain special kind of person that is willing to risk the social shame of it, right? Because of that, I think it probably, like the scenario I just described, probably does happen. It's just no one shares it. Not enough people, anyway. Welcome, I'm Paul. This is Dave. Today I have 9 Glitch in the Matrix and paranormal stories for you. My favorite one has to be the soccer one you just listened to, but there's quite a few more interesting ones coming up too. Don't worry, let's get to it. Story by JC1993 Moat. The Promotion Day Plot Twist. I live in a mid-sized city that is very sprawled with tons of traffic and roads. I also have a brother-in-law who's like a little brother to me, and we're pretty close. I was working at a grocery store downtown and applying for a higher position at a different location closer to my house. I was sent to work at that new location for a day to meet everyone and get a feel for the job and see if I would be a good fit. This was not standard practice for a potential transfer and promotion in this company. I shouldn't have been there that day. We also managed to wrap everything up and finish all the necessary tasks, close the department down, and leave 2 hours early that day. This is also unheard of. Because I was at a different location, I drove home a different way than I normally do. And since I left 2 hours early, I was on the road at a time I wouldn't normally be, and passed an intersection where a wreck had just happened. By all accounts, I shouldn't have been there. As I drove past the scene, cops directing traffic, I looked over and saw my 17-year-old brother-in-law sitting on the side of the road, his face covered in blood. Of course, I freaked out and circled back. He was riding in a friend's car when someone ran a red light and smashed into them. He was alright, just minor cuts from some glass and the airbag bloodied his nose. But it's an absolutely unreal experience to drive past a wreck and unexpectedly see someone you love sitting on the road, covered in blood. But the coincidences that had to line up for me to pass at that time was unreal. Story by Ecstatic Caller 4503. The address exists, sometimes. I used to deliver medicines for a pharmacy. Aside from getting a new client here and there, my route was pretty routine. I just had to look at the client's name and I knew where to go. So I get in my car and I check where the next delivery is going and I head that way. When I got there, it looked normal, nothing out of the ordinary. But when I got to the spot where they lived, all of a sudden there was no house there. It was a row of storages. Usually those storages were on the opposite side of the street, diagonally, and their house saw the back side of the garages. I sat there for a minute thinking about it. Did I accidentally turn the wrong way? No, there's only one way to turn. Did I not go back far enough? I had to, because taking the first turn would lead me to the other side of the apartments. So I backed out, went back to the entrance, and did the exact same thing I did the first time, and the house was back. There's only one way into and out of the apartments. There's only 2 turns. The first one takes you to the front half, and the other turn, my turn, leads you to the back half of the apartments. I don't know, but it was really weird. It never happened again, just that one time. Story by OK Quail, 9021. The Wrong Right House. I have previously written about an incident that happened while dropping off my son with his dad. Apparently, this is a glitch trigger for us because a few months ago, something else happened that is really hard to explain. Right before Christmas last year, I went to pick up my kids at their dad's house, a thing I'd done dozens of times. While longish, this isn't a drive I need directions for, it's road. And indeed, everything about the drive that day was typical, except when I pulled up to the address. It wasn't his house. Different paint, different cars, differently shaped driveway. More lights. Usually there are kid toys outside and 2 cars in a driveway. There were 2, but the wrong make and models. The neighborhood is oddly shaped, such that you can't really get turned around, because every street is very different. Not only would you have to make wildly different turns, you'd just know right away because there isn't another street that is configured anything like this. I sat there for a second, just kinda staring at the house like it would fix itself for me if I waited long enough. I didn't want to tell baby daddy because of the previous incident. There's only so much weirdness I can show to a co-parent before my sanity is called into question, right? So I sat and tried to recall if I had done anything at all differently. I even pulled out Google Maps in frustration, and here's the thing. It said I was exactly where I was supposed to be, sitting in the correct driveway. My little dot was perfectly where I ought to be. Not knowing what to do, after a few minutes I just turned around and made my way back out to the main road before the neighborhood turnoff, following the same turns as always, though I can't vouch for the other houses being the same. So in other words, the streets were shaped properly. The house was in the right spot, it just wasn't the right house. Anyway, I got back out to the main road, then retraced my steps. To my immense relief, I ended up at his house. I mean, my stomach was in knots. Ugh, and I so regret not taking a picture before I pulled away. Why didn't I think to do that? When I called to say that I was here, he was like, "Why did you text me when you weren't even here yet?" I said I, intentionally, hadn't texted him. He said he got a text saying, "Here," and came out, but no one was there. He then checked his phone in front of me, but the text was gone. I still haven't told him about this one, and again, because it sounds like I'm bonkers. This made me wonder of the different possible houses you might see if you transition to a different universe, which again, I believe is what happened. As is so often the case, the solution is, can't explain why it happens, just that this is probably the way it fits into any kind of rationality, is that it's a different universe. Okay, cool. If we can accept that, we can play around with the idea. And I think it's very fun. Imagine the kinds of homes, the weird, wacky homes you could actually witness. Things that are beyond our senses, beyond our comprehension. It's like trying to imagine 4D space. I mean, maybe not that extreme, but you could have homes that are more futuristic. Maybe the other universe you visit is more advanced. Maybe in that universe, they didn't have the Dark Ages. Could you imagine that? That'd be so cool. How much more advanced they'd be, centuries ahead of us. What would homes look like a century from now, or more? I can't wait to find out. Also, about taking a photo. This is something I would suggest to anyone listening if they ever do encounter a parallel universe reality where things are different enough to be interesting enough to share. Take a picture, because I don't think the cell service would work, the cell connecting to the cell tower, because of how encryption works. It wouldn't. But the picture itself, the phone should still activate and turn on, and the camera should work, and everything should save data onto the SSD internally. So that should all work. Take a picture. Yeah, just take pictures. Evidence is always better than no evidence, right? Story by Meridian Wheaties, The Pineapple Man. Circa 2016. I was going through a rough time. I hated my ex, who watched YouTube videos incessantly. I was depressed, yada yada yada. One day I decided I would connect with him and actually watch the video in front of me. The video was of a popular YouTuber at the time, and this particular one. He bought a storage unit that was abandoned and went through it with his friends. He takes out a baseball collection, and then next, he takes out the statue of what appears to be a glass Mexican with a sombrero, and these clay-looking glass cups. I chuckled and said, I want that. Mostly, I wanted the clay cups, but I didn't think that deep on it. I also deemed the man Pineapple Man, because his body was yellow and it just resembled a pineapple. A few days have passed and I'm walking around my house past the fireplace with a shelf above it. There's something on it. My brain went fuzzy. I was trying to place where I'd seen it before. It was the Pineapple Man? Not the full thing though. It was a sombrero and the cups, but not the body. I freaked out and ran to my patio to find anyone, and my brother's girlfriend was right there, asking her if she bought it, and my ex runs out saying, Dude, did you just see what's on the mantle? Turns out my brother, whilst dumpster diving, found the exact thing that I saw in that YouTube video. We do not live in LA, where the video was filmed and uploaded a week prior. My brother explained he left the body because he didn't think they were related. He would do big hauls of dumpster diving. So I got my clay cups because I said I wanted them. Story by Hockey Player 16. Edited history. I work for a company that repairs computers for schools. When we diagnose a computer, we write on the tag what parts are needed, and the part requests are kept electronically on 2 different programs. I got back a computer that had a bad screen, LCD. When I installed the new one, the camera's circuit board broke, so I went to write it down on the tag. But it turns out the tag already had that on it, which didn't make sense because I didn't have anything in my electronic notes about the web camera. I even showed multiple coworkers and they checked what I had typed into our programs and it was nowhere to be found. I even checked the edit logs and it wasn't in there either. A few of them said, oh, maybe you just forgot that you had already written it down. But here's the thing, I'm very much a creature of habit, so I have to do things a certain way every time. Almost to the point where you could say it was an obsessive-compulsive or autistic trait. I always leave my pens in the same place on my desk when I'm using them for the day, and at the end of the day, they always get returned to my desk caddy. Both of my ballpoint pens were still in the desk caddy, and this is my first computer of the day, so obviously I had not written anything anywhere yet. And there it was, marked right on the tag. I'm starting to notice more and more things that are really throwing me for a loop. Also, regarding the tag's handwriting, my own? Well, that's the other weird thing I'm still not sure about. A couple of people in my department have very similar handwriting as I do, to the point where sometimes I can't tell the difference between their handwriting and my own. That's why I specifically asked certain people, because I thought maybe one of them had written on it after I'd already diagnosed it. It also doesn't help that about 85% of our service technicians are all left-handed, including myself. Story by Forgive Me. Imaginary isn't always. When my mom and dad split up, I started going to my mom's new boyfriend's house every other week. Honestly, I loved it, because they had an Xbox 360, and I was a huge gamer. Being able to play online was a massive upgrade from my Game Boy and Nintendo 64 days. My mom's boyfriend had 2 daughters. One was 3 and the other was 6. The older one always talked about her imaginary friend. She had this whole backstory for this kid, and at the time I was around 10 years old or so, I just figured she was doing what kids do and making up a friend. A few weeks later, I got into the habit of waking up at 4 in the morning before school so I could play Modern Warfare 2 online before everyone else got up. One morning, while I was playing, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye down the hallway. The hallway connected both bedrooms and the bathroom. My mom's room was on the left, and the kids' room was on the right. Standing in front of the kids' room door was a little girl wearing a white dress. My heart completely dropped. At first, I thought one of the daughters had gotten out of bed, so I got up to check. When I opened the bedroom door, everyone was still asleep. The weird thing is that wasn't the only thing that happened there. There was a tire swing hanging from a tree in the backyard that would sometimes move by itself, even when there was barely any wind. My mom also swore she heard knocking on her bedroom window at night. Both bedroom windows faced the fenced backyard and not the street. The gate stayed locked, so it wasn't like random people could just walk back there. Then there was the attic. Right above the closet in the kids' room was an attic space that nobody used. Every now and then you could hear what sounded like things falling or moving up there. The creepy part is that the 6-year-old always said that that was where her imaginary friend lived. Nobody stored anything up there, and nobody ever went up there. Ever since then, when a kid tells me they have an imaginary friend, I assume it's a ghost at this point. Story by Top Swinging, 6104. The main entrance is not available. When I worked as a delivery driver, I often made deliveries to the hospital in my city. I knew the place very well because the route was always the same. At the entrance, there were 3 gates, one leading to the emergency room, one leading to the hospital's main entrance, and one for exiting. The main entrance was clearly visible from the road and could be reached by driving slightly uphill. Every time the security guard would let me in, I would park somewhere in the main courtyard, walk to the reception desk, and then leave through the exit gate. One evening, however, something strange happened. I entered through the gate that normally led to the main entrance, but instead of the large hospital building I was used to seeing, there was a dark driveway leading down to an ambulance parking area. The main entrance seemed to have completely disappeared. Confused, I asked the guard where the hospital's main entrance was. Annoyed, he pointed straight ahead and told me that it was right there. I couldn't understand what he was talking about, because all I could see was the ambulance area. I even got out of my car to look around and make sure I wasn't missing something. The guard even started yelling at me to move because I was blocking the way. Eventually, I drove into the ambulance parking area, although I was worried my car would be in the way if an ambulance needed to leave. A few moments later, the customer I was delivering to, a doctor, came out through a side service door as if everything was completely normal. What made the experience even stranger was what happened when I left. The central exit gate that I always used was gone. I couldn't make my usual U-turn and leave the way I normally did. Instead, I had to follow a long internal road that went all the way around the hospital complex before I could get out. At the time, I had never heard the concept of a glitch in reality. It was only years later that I thought back to that experience and wondered if it could fit into that category. To this day, I can't explain why the hospital appeared completely different from how I had seen it dozens of times before and after that night. On every visit after that, everything was back to normal. Story by Jackie Torrance. Loop, plug, repeat. I was recently in a hospital for surgery and had to stay 2 nights. They told me to bring my phone charger and plug as there were no USB ports. So I had a little drawstring bag which I put the charger and plug, deodorant, toothbrush, earbuds, and a few candies in. My clothes and shoes were in the closet, and this little bag I had with me on my bed tray. At home, I had to go digging in my cord drawer for the longest USB-A to USB-C cord I had, which had a kind of black and white houndstooth pattern to it, fabric covered, and is like 8 foot long. I figured the plug outlet at the hospital would be on the wall far away, so I would need my long one to comfortably reach the bed. Then I dug up a spare USB-A to outlet plug to plug the cord into. I curled the cord into circles and sort of tied it, and plugged the cord on one end and put it in the bag. The night of the surgery, I asked the nurse where the outlet was so I could plug in my charging cord. She said the outlet was actually awkwardly under the bed railing, attached to the bed frame. The plug had to be plugged in vertically into a little box, as in the prongs were pointed at the ceiling. She plugged it in for me, and I tied my end of the cord in a loose loop around the bed railing so it wouldn't fall. I didn't use it that night, and had PT and breakfast the next day. I was digging in my bag for something, and weirdly, found the cord and plug still in my bag, tied in a circle. Of course, I assumed a nurse had needed the outlet and had unplugged it and put it in my bag at night or when I was away at PT. So when the day nurse came in next, I just handed it to her and asked her if she would please plug it back in for me. She takes it and bends down and says, "You already have one in here." And I immediately looked at the bed railing to see if the cord was still tied there. But apparently it had fallen down. But the plug was still plugged in, and the cord was plugged into that, just lying on the floor. I was completely confused, mostly because I know I only had one 8-foot houndtooth colored long cord. These aren't exactly normal looking. And there was just no explanation as to how two of them just magically showed up. I sat there dumbfounded. I tried to explain to the nurse I only had one, and now there were two. She was confused too. I said I guess it's a glitch in the Matrix. She hadn't heard the term, so I told her to give it a search if she wanted to go down an internet rabbit hole. After years of reading about it happening to others, I found when it happened to me, there was just so much self-doubt and the overall feeling there must be an explanation. But there is no way I own two of them. No way they were both in that bag when I reached for the first one the day before. It is a very small bag, maybe just smaller than a gallon Ziploc bag, with a drawstring which made it smaller when drawn up. And just no way two came with me from home to the hospital and ended up in my room. It's all just so strange. Okay, not too much to say on this one, besides that I find it so fascinating. I mentioned before how it takes a special kind of person to share their glitch experience, but it's even beyond that. Like the nurse didn't even know about glitches in the Matrix. They're not even aware that this is a thing. So if something weird happens to them, it's not their first thought. If something weird happens to me, it's my first thought, and probably for a lot of you listening. But yeah, for a lot of these people, they have no context at all when these things happen. So you can just imagine how often it happens to people, and they're none the wiser. They ignore it, they move on, they don't even know about it. It takes a very rare person for it to happen to them to go online, to search around, to find glitch in the Matrix groups, paranormal groups, and post about it as well. So yeah, the only point to that is that given how small a percentage that person is, how many actual glitches and paranormal events are happening in the broad scope, of the whole population, holistically. It's massive, I would suspect. Now time for the jokes of the day. I was on a date with a woman who kept randomly interjecting our conversation with opinions. They don't make bedsheets like they used to. Quilting is boring. Duvet covers aren't worth the money. Finally I said, "You've got to stop making blanket statements." A very skinny girl came into a bookstore and asked the clerk, "What is the chance you would have a book on religion curing an eating disorder?" The clerk responded, "Slim to none." If you cut off your left arm, your right arm will be left. My wife lost her dictionary. I tried comforting her, but my words seem to have no meaning to her now. 3 conspiracy theorists walk into a bar. You can't tell me that's not a coincidence. It's facts. Alright, more glitches up here. Check them out. See you next time.